Yes, ma'am. Uh, the the title of my paper is The World of Shudra Bhakti, and my association with Bhakti has been through Mahatma Gandhi and how Gandhi invited M.S. Subbulakshmi to sing Mirabai, and how he took Mirabai and her bhajans to the home frontier and brought women to the forefront of political activism in the Indian context. So the world of Bhakti, though, has been my area of study for a short while. It's the first time that I am trying to do something with regard to Oriya literature, with regard to Bhakti, and thank you, Siddharth, for bringing me to this platform. Uh, I start I start with a very small beginning of Parachigita, which was composed during the 17th century, mid 17th and later part of the 17th century, and then I go on to explore the world of Shudra Bhakti. And this is a work in progress, so I would appreciate if there are questions, there are comments and suggestions. I begin. In Parachigita, Dwarakadasa presents the desire of the absolute from being Nirguna, the formless deity without form, to Saguna. He suggests that in the beginning there was darkness. It is from darkness that the Creator God came into being. The Creator God had embodied within him both feminine and masculine principles, but embodied within himself the Nirguna form. He desired his 10 incarnations thereafter to preserve the righteous against the wrong. In one of his 10 incarnations, as Krishna, the Absolute, offers esoteric knowledge to Arjuna, the most intelligent among the Pandavas. Arjuna desires to know the Absolute, and Krishna tells him that the knowledge of the Gita, the most secret of the esoteric knowledge, few. And even Krishna's parents, both foster parents and real parents, including his wives and the gopis, they failed to acquire this knowledge, the knowledge of the absolute, and including that of the Gita. In fact, Krishna tells that the knowledge of the Gita is more valuable than gold, one's family, and even one's own life. It is only with devotion to a true guru that esoteric knowledge can be acquired. Since Arjuna seeks a guru in Krishna, submits himself completely to him, and talks of his urge, the overwhelming urge within, to know the divine, that he achieves to know the absolute. So begins the description of Parachigita, which becomes a significant addition to the textual universe of the Vaishnava Bhakti cult, though modern scholars such as Shamsundar Rajguru charge him as a lowly poet. Given the fact that Dwarakadasa, the poet who composed Parachigita, hailed from a Karana family and self-identified himself as a Shudra, it gives rise to a discursive field of knowledge inquiry on the prevalence of the caste system, access to esoteric knowledge, patronage, and dissemination of the Bhakti texts during the 17th and 18th centuries. While it's not surprising that Shudra Bhakti texts of the 17th and 18th centuries Odisha have survived to this day, it's wise to state that they sought to negotiate, challenge, settle, and unsettle contemporary cultural and social ethics, dilemmas, and the morals within. Dwarakadasa, who went on to compose the Shaiva Purana, lived the life of a Vaishnavite Bhakta throughout. Dedicated to serve his chosen deity Krishna, it is told that with divine intervention he escaped early miseries, accepted Narayana as his guru, and with divine blessings he solved people's issues, attained the status of a saint, and preserved the land's cultural harmony. Dwarakadasa is one of the earliest Shudra saints in what later came to be called as Shudra Bhakti movement in Odishan cultural tradition. Other Shudra Bhaktas include, but are not limited to, Bajari Das, who composed Artha Govinda, an Odia version of Gita Govinda, and Chaitanya Dasa, who composed Nirgunya Mahatmya, Vishnu Garbha Puran, among others. And the list continues. Dwarakadasa composed Saraswat Gita in the Navakshatra authentic caste and hailed from the Patna Sonpur region. Bhakta Haridas composed Mayura Chandrika. He came from the Gopala caste and belonged to the Gaudiya Parampara. Vaishn- Vaishya Sadashiva composed the immensely popular Ram Leela. He hailed from the northern areas of Ganjam district. Harikrishna Maharana translated Ekadashi Mahatmya from Sanskrit to Odia, and he came from the caste of Chitrakara and was associated with the royal court of Parlakhemandi. Bhimadevara composed Kapatapasha, and the list continues, and we got to search more if there are other texts also. So it's important to mention that Parachya Gita is not the only text that circulated in public domain during this period. Several poets and saints who hailed from Shudra communities roamed about the land, composed devotional texts during the period under review. So these poet bhaktas chiefly, also acquired a significant position in Odisha's literary and cultural life, composing songs in local dialects and thereby giving the dialects a literary status. Their way of life, devotion to a personal but pan-Indian deity, became a trend in Odishan cultural setting and religious practices. Both Shudra and non-Shudra poet saints moved about the land, engaging people in social and religious spheres in and after the 17th century. The Shudra poet saints in places like Puri, Ganjam, Sonpur, Khordha gave public performances reciting devotional songs, mystical experiences, counseling people on day-to-day issues, and showing them a path of devotion for greater socio-cultural harmony. While bringing in religious poetry to come out to the streets, the poets take refuge in pan-Indian cultural heritage and contemporize alternative mythologies. What unites all these texts and all these authors is their textual self-identification as Shudra, as well as identical choice of subjects and themes about which I'll be speaking a bit. Bhimadevara's Kapata Pasha, for instance, presents a central episode of the Mahabharata where Draupadi, ravished owing to the game of dice, seeks to castigate the Pandavas for their evil deeds. The setting is Kurusava, where Draupadi faces her husbands, the Pandavas. After Yudhishthira loses his kingdom, his brothers, and his wife Draupadi, Dushasana drags Draupadi by the hair and tries to disrobe her. Two significant phenomena occur here: Draupadi castigates her husbands, while she completely submits to the divine. Krishna, in the form of Jagannath, comes to the rescue. In the text, it's Draupadi's submission to the divine as a bhakta and her humiliation in the face of social evil are narrated thereafter, and her absolute bhakti towards the deity is tested. In addition, the audience is encouraged to participate in her worldview with the devotion, complete devotion. While Krishna, and most importantly Jagannath, is supreme, he is locally concerned with the devotee, and it's the devotee's devotion that affects literature, rituals, and kingship in the larger setting. Kapatapasha, moreover, remains unique owing to Bhimadevara's choice of subject, which is pan-Indian, and the description of the landscape, which is localized to a significant extent. Surely the message is that the good shall be saved and the bad damned. The poetical universe begins in tricks, cheating, cruelty, evil game of dice, molestation, but goes into complete submission to the divine, love, compassion, and thereby salvation. So ancient foundational texts such as the Vedas, the Bible, the Quran were available only to the initiated. That is what at least we argue these days. That is, the literate who were either twice born or baptized or circumcised. It's said that Brahmins alone could recite the Vedas because they had access to Sanskrit. How may a Shudra Bhakta then sing the song of God and love in mainstream cultural landscapes which are traditionally charged with Brahmanism and casteism? How may one project the multifold subjugation of the self, be it cultural, social, or historical? How may one restrict the refusal of Shudrahood and thereby bring back peripheral existence from oblivion to light? The polite world of Shudra Bhakti is full of surprises to the modern scholar and offers significant challenges to this historical enterprise. For instance, Bajaridas produced Artha Govinda, an Odia version of the Gita Govinda. And the poetical universe of the Shudra poets derives from pan-Indian literary and cultural landscapes, thereby the knowledge of the culture and localizes them to a significant extent. One wouldn't go far but to say Saraswat Gita by Ratnakar Dasa, which is set after Mahabharata war when Yudhishthira evokes Lord Yamaraj, seeking guidance about his righteousness to become a king. This poem presents various shreds of Shudra Bhakti wherein readers encounter instances where Ratnakar Das considers all people to be equal, terms them as the children of God, and in this context he says, whether Brahmana, Vaishya, Kshatriya or Shudra, O God, you are part of us. He tells that if the Supreme Being supports someone, however low he might be, he is always protected and is thus wealthy. The poet too places himself at the feet of the Absolute. The poet feels that it was because of the supreme command that he was able to compose this poem. He presents that the Supreme Being has himself narrated him the verses of the Saraswat Gita. So these are tricks in fact applied by the poets. There are occasional references where the poet calls himself low-born, and in the poem we find that there is only it's only through his bhakti and devotion as well as submission to the divine that he can attain salvation and find inner peace. So it's important to recount that the Bhakti movement may not have given a very unique status to the Shudra Bhaktas in the initial periods. And Shudra Bhaktas may not have always been considered saintly figures in a caste society. However, Shudra Bhaktas were accepted by the gurus from whom they could learn the language and art of writing elaborate poetry and embraced the path of serving a personal deity, singing and counseling people to follow the path of devotion. Apparently, they were also deeply critical of contemporary Orthodox theology, caste divides of their contemporary times, and this is the part that I am going to explore further. But right now, I don't have much material on this, and I got to explore that. That the poets continuously call themselves as Shudras and yet blessed is a case in point. This phenomenon of action prayer, public performance, and composing poetry narrate the Shudra devotees' mystical experiences of union with the divine being. Their performative desire for unity with the Supreme Being, shifts to their boundless love for humanity. In addition, with community participation, the community's hardships were also represented by representative figures such as Sita, Radha, Draupadi, which gave the movement a distinct characteristic. So, to conclude, within the Shudra Bhakti trend, which has a regenerative power to transgress cultures, poets such as Dhivara, Dwarakadasa, Ratnakar Dasa, and others encouraged a community to search for a better alternative that could accommodate the spiritual worlds of Shudra and downtrodden communities. They broke the orthodox Brahminical tradition and seeking an alternative life from the caste specified vocation, they gave voice to a future generation of spiritually inclined Shudra Bhaktas. Occasionally, they also lived the life of a true Bhakta away from domestic blessings in pursuit of an intense personal life. Their acceptance of family, religion, pan-Indian epics, and bhakti get excluded from modern discussion on caste and spirituality to this day. These are some of the most powerful symbols that the Shudra Bhakti tradition nurtured for individual and social gains. So, in the next couple of months and year that I am going to work on this particular project, is to see how parallelly Gandhi is bringing the marginalized to the forefront of political activism, and how the Shudra poets in different parts of the land they are bringing other people to form different kind of communities to come out and sing together a couple of bhajans so that devotion becomes stronger and a new community is actually generated out of it. Thank you so much.
and then Vaishnava, the bhakti tradition, bringing in the community worship, community congregation, etc., together as a way of building. Um, can we say? I don't know how far it will be acceptable in this forum if I say building protest of a certain kind, of resisting hegemony of a certain kind. It was necessary to build communities, and the pattern of religious congregation helped do this, build communities. But I'm also interested, Akshay, in one point. What about the language which was being used by the Shudra writers? Because if you look at the language, especially if I look at Salabigo, for example, 17th century Odisha. In Salabago, you find absolutely sanitized language. Only point in all the songs of Salabago which I have heard, a song by Akhyamanti, you find Dorsanoku, instead of Dorsana, they'll say Drosan. I mean, ଦର୍ଶନ କେଣେ ଘେନି ଯାଉଛ ଜଗନ୍ନାଥଙ୍କୁ ଆମେ ଦର୍ଶନ କରିବୁ କାହାକୁ. Apart, except for that one word, I mean, it is surprising that if that word is present as such, it shows it is a hint that maybe the whole song was not really sanitized the way we find it, and maybe this has just been kept back as a token. So, is there evidence of the so-called language, other kinds of Odia, other varieties present in the writings which you find of the Sudra Kabis of Bhakti tradition? Did you find them during your search?
Ma'am, thank you for raising this point. There are two parts. The first part is whether it's a protest, the community that is being generated out of Bhakti movement is actually to come out and protest. But my way of looking at the Indian Bhakti archive has been something like this. When Mirabai is coming out of her Kshatriya community, she is being accommodated by the women folks, those who are from the lower caste. Women from the lower caste societies, they are coming out to accommodate Mira, probably by asking a couple of questions like, look, this is a woman of high origin and is thrown out. Maybe that's kind of feeling that they have towards them, towards her. And anyhow, a community life is being built by women chiefly during this period when Mira is coming out of home to start singing and dancing, in fact. So there's this generation of women bhaktas in pan-Indian bhakti archives who are coming out in that way to come out and sing, come out and start a community living. But in Odisha context, I got to check whether there's this serious community formation that. But in terms of language, ma'am, I'll look into it. I got to see. Yes, I have come across a few words like that, but this is my first time about the text. On the future day, yes, I should be in a position to tell you more about language.
Thank you. Thank you, Akshay. Any other questions for Akshay?
Thanks, Akshay. I enjoyed a lot to listen to you. I have one thought, and if you can elaborate on it, if you wish. This access to uh, knowledge formation and knowledge communication, and how we see a Chitrakara caste doing a translation, and I'm sure you're gonna explore it further and actually do the take the work further. So this access to knowledge formation and communication of knowledge, these are some aspects which I like very much. And to historically situate them, what this text would enable you to do is to get these questions historically situated in 18th century Odisha. So that historical situation would help us to know more accurately. So any thoughts that you might have, or any
Uh,
comments that you would
at
like?
this point of, thank you, Siddharth. At this point of time, probably I have only two categories of thoughts with regard to access to the knowledge system, knowledge approach. The first could be possibly through a guru, through probably a guru shishya parampara, that's what we used to say. And how many gurus could accept a Shudra Bhakta? That part I'm not sure about, but there have been instances where these poet saints have been educated. Educated meaning someone could read Sanskrit, someone could translate from Sanskrit, someone had access to Sanskrit. That indicates that there's this strong Guru Shishya tradition, and that was not restricted to Brahmins and the upper castes only. So probably with that line of argument, we could see that even some people, if at all the number is small, they could have access to the knowledge system, including its scripts. If not scripts, probably as Professor Mishra pointed out, that there is this serious community formation that's happening throughout India with the Bhakti movement. If probably I got to think in that direction, it might be also from the community participation that people could access the knowledge system. But with regard to script, it has to be a guru. So these are two categories of thoughts that I'll have.
Thanks, Dan. And I think Professor Danta
Thank
has
you.
a.
Yeah. Professor Danta, your question, please.
Thank you, Akshay, actually, for that very interesting paper. I'm just wondering if you could also think about linking this archival, protest or radicalism to what comes. I'm not very sure about the historical, period the writers you talk about, but then in Odisha itself, you have a very distinct Shudra Bhakti tradition in Vimabhoi. And but then when you look at the language, there is absolutely no compromise on the language because Vimabhoi writes, a language which is as good as any other. But then the thing that I wanted to talk about is actually slightly different. In Assam, for instance, you see, Bhakti emerged as a challenge to the caste system and to the Brahminical, hierarchy created in society. And Sankardev united people from all castes and categories. He had Brahmin disciples, he had Kshatriya disciples, he had disciples who were tribals, and he also had disciples who were Muslim. But then, having done that, in about 50 to 70 years after Sankardev's death, the Assamese Bhakti tradition created a new kind of caste hierarchy. And by 1768, you had a group of, you see, in Assam, you do not have, the Dalit consciousness that you have elsewhere, but then people from the Kaivarta community, mostly in Odisha, we call them Keutars, Kaivarta community and the so-called lower castes, they organized themselves between 1769 and, it took a very long period called the Mao Maurya Revolution. Mao Maurya Revolution. And that Mao Maurya Revolution created a fourth branch of Assamese Vaishnavism, which is called Kala Sanghati. And then so their, Bhakti radicalism is not necessarily against Brahminical, caste system, but then against the new caste system and hierarchy that was created by Bhakti itself. So maybe that would, give a little bit of weapon to what you're trying to say. But then I would like to maybe ask you to also check the historical linkage between when it evolved and if there was any historical explanation for, people kind of coming out and saying we are Shudras and we want to be Shudra Bhaktas. Was there any historical linkage between this assertion, which would have been very uncomfortable at that particular point of time? Because people presented themselves as Dasa Bhaktas. Okay, mostly whatever, whether you are a Brahmin or Kshatriya or whatever community you came from, you kind of disguised your own family surname and called yourself Dasa. Okay, if you're a Vaishnava, you call yourself Dasa. So somebody coming out and saying we are Shudras and should be treated as Shudra Bhaktas, was there any kind of historical link between, the Maratha Shudra Bhakti tradition and there might be a linkage. I'm not a student of this. I won't know. But then please just check if it is possible. That would perhaps give, maybe a kind of wider, relevance to your research. But then thank you very much. It was a very interesting paper. And, wish you all the best.
Could I respond? Could I add a
Yes,
sentence to this?
Please do.
Thank you, Professor Danta. Yes, I shall definitely look at the radicalization part, but I would like to add a sentence to what you just said. Since the Bhakti tradition is becoming more caste hierarchical, in the sense it's forming a different category of caste, I was thinking whether it's also becoming more urban slowly, and the Bhakti tradition that emerged also in the villages, that's going to be a shift to the urban areas. This is probably something that I could connect with. And yes,
Some,
Bhima
yeah.
Boy's case, I shall actually consider on a future day. Thank you. Thank you,
Just
Thank you.
one
Professor.
Thank you.
second. Actually, one sec, Professor Mishra.
Yeah.
Shankardev actually, he visited Odisha in the early part of the 15th century, and then he lived in Puri for about 12 years, using Puri as a kind of point of departure or a point of rest. And we do not know whether he met Jagannath Das, but then there is a lot of speculation, including speculation created by me, that he may have. Jagannath Das and Simanta Sankardev may have met, but then that's not the point now. The point is, Sankardev, lived between 1449 and 1568, and then has a very huge following in Assam and in the northeast. But then after him, they had what is called the Purusha Sangati. Sankardev's own relatives emerged as the main gurus. And then in the process, there was a kind of patronage created around Satras. These are the Assamese monasteries. And then this patronage created a wealth, production system. So the guru got wealth and money, and then, a kind of tax as well in some Chatra areas, and then created a new caste system. So the Guru's community, primarily they were Kayasthas, not definitely Brahmins, and then they emerged as the new Brahmins of the Bhakti dispensation, and that created a lot of problem in Assam. Okay, so I want you to maybe look at that. Maybe I wish actually I could maybe I would definitely send a couple of papers to you which are on this area. So
Thank you, sir.
maybe you can contextualize it in relation to Odisha Shudra poets. But then I do not have any problem with your hypothesis. That sounds very interesting. I just wanted you to know that there is a context, in Assam as well, but a slightly different kind of context. Okay, thank you so much. I don't have anything
Thank you.
else. But then thank you.
Thank you so much. Um, Again, very interesting discussion.